Hello for the fifth Sunday in Lent. Getting close to Easter. Next week's Passion, Palm Sunday. And then the following Sunday, Easter. And this gospel reading from John, which is what mainly I'm using, is one of my favorite, but not always. But it's one of my favorite, really, that I use most of the time when I do a funeral and then wind up burying the body at the cemetery, which is a very short little ceremony. And I use this as the gospel reading because of the grain of wheat, that the grain of wheat must die and be buried into the ground. And so do we. We must die. We must be not necessarily buried in the ground, but we could also be cremated and go into the wall, in the crematory, not and then into the wall at the columbarium. Very graphic. It'd be better, even more graphic, if we use an acorn instead of a grain of wheat. But grain's much smaller than acorn, but I like acorn too. That somehow, when the squirrel puts the acorn in the ground, or we would even plant it in the ground, or the farmer plants the wheat in the ground, it must die to itself. This must germinate, go into the ground, take roots, and then in due time, it's a whole new something much bigger, much better, and it's productive. And it'll last a long time, an oak tree, 100 years or whatever. The grain of wheat or the field of wheat, a season or whatever. Pretty appropriate. What happens to a little baby in due time to an old man, an old lady who goes into the wall or goes into the ground. How morbid, how morbid. But how realistic is that explanation from Jesus? And so I really like that. There's part of that gospel that I don't like too much at all either. And then Jesus talks about loving yourself and hating yourself. I don't know about you, but I would rather love myself than hate myself. Do you love your life? Do you pamper yourself? Uh, or do you, you know, like to not do all that you hate yourself? Well, I fall in the direction of loving myself and pampering myself and not looking forward to dying to self. So there's that little part of dying to self that I die to my own will or whim or desire, for the sake of maybe even me or for the sake of you or for the sake of giving up and not taking it, participating in it, to die to self in small little ways. I'm sorry. Uh, I'll give a little, you know, dying to self. It's not easy, but it certainly is important in life. But then really there is that big giving up or that big dying to self. If you're a grain of wheat, you're a summer, 1 year. If you're an acorn, you can go 100 years. If you're a human, you can go somewhere in between the grain of wheat or the oak tree. Take your pick. What do you want? This Easter season is headed toward Passion Sunday, Palm Sunday, heading toward Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, and it has to do with dying, the death of Jesus. That he came, He suffered, he died, and he came back to life again. He's the first one who did it. And that exact same thing is going to come upon us. We've been born. Next Friday, I'll be born 82 years. It's my birthday. I'm getting more like the oak that ran away. But we come, we love, we suffer, we experience all kinds of things. We die and try to die to self. And we try to prepare or have the insight of Jesus that what happened to Jesus will happen to us. It happened to him 30 years. After that first Christmas, 30 years or so, he suffered, died, and rose again. Death is all part of life. And he was the first one who went through it and came back. Easter's the biggest feast because it's the biggest reality that we have been planted on planet Earth, and we're going to live a good number of years, and we're going to experience death, but it is not the end. It's not the end. Death is not ended, it's changed. That's what it says in that preface that I like at funeral masses, that life is not ended, it's changed. And the big change has already taken place for one individual, and that big change is going to take place for you as an individual, and myself as an individual, and everybody else. What happened to Jesus will happen to us. That's why Easter is the biggest and the best feast, and probably the most realistic feast, and in totality feast of what happens in life. Why you were born, why you will die, and why you will be changed again and born into everlasting life. Nothing's more important than that. And this gospel that I experienced this week with my niece's husband, which was a immediate death, sort of within that evening, massive heart attack, 71 years old. But it's the insight of Jesus. What happened to Jesus will happen to me. What happened to Jesus will happen to you. Do you believe that? That's sort of scary, sort of spooky, but it's reality if you believe. Well, even if you don't believe, I think it's going to happen. So I'm happy that Jesus has given me this insight, this faith, and I believe in him, that he suffered, died, and rose again. And that same thing will happen to me. That's the best possible news you can get. Have a good day.